So I've had the pleasure of spending some time with Hex Feature, a father, a husband, singer-songwriter, and guitarist. A man who's had an interesting journey, riding the wave of music the last 25 some odd years. Beginning his journey, as many of us, with high school friends in his late teens. He's played in acts like Diana's Bath, The Shipwrecks, more recently adding a guitar to Shine Box. He's developed and evolved his sound projects like Logo, a hard-driving punk sound, and the very unique and hauntingly satisfying music of Boxcar Hex and the Rahway River Banks. So I invite you to take a journey getting to know Hex, the joy music brings to him, and the drive to bring his frequency to you.
So, hey Hex, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
You got to tell everybody, what is it about the Rahway River?
Something about water. It's an interesting element in that we need it to survive, but it controls so much of us. It puts us in peril. You know, just think of how, look here, how much it's controlled our development here. We've got the highway across there, we have this over here. And, you know, I was working on a set of songs and kind of kept coming back to the water, and the Rahway River is kind of the thing I run into it every day. It runs through my town. Here it is here. It's kind of became the center of some instrumentals I was working on at the time, and just in my thoughts when I was sort of doing this project. So
very cool.
It's always nice to come down here and appreciate it. Its power and beauty. Just everything it creates around us. It's wonderful.
So what's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you at a show?
Let's see. The funniest thing that's happened to me on stage. I was a roadie for a band called Smith House, and we had done kind of about a 4 or 5 month tour across, supposed to be across the U.S. In very Spinal Tap fashion. A lot of shows got canceled, so we never made it across. We made it, I think, about as far as Lawrence, Kansas, Chicago, you know, that sort of end of the Mississippi. That's about as far as we made it. We were playing a show in Kansas City. And the bass player, we got on a little later than we were supposed to. The bass player drank a little more than he should have.
Always.
And yeah, those bass players, you know, they broke a string, a bass string, which is impressive. Did it on stage.
Been there.
And we changed his string without stopping as he was playing, because things were going so terrible. Why not? And didn't miss a beat.
That is awesome.
Change the string, and then he later threw up in a bucket on stage too. So, you know,
G.G. Allen-esque.
There you go. I don't know if that's what he was going for, but if there was any sort of, you know.
You weren't checking his drawers, so.
No, I wasn't. I don't know if it was an artistic thing, or he was making a statement, or he just drank too much.
Now this was a punk group?
It was like a kind of like a jazz fusion kind of thing, which, you know, eventually developed really into, you know, a rock pop kind of thing after I sort of, you know, left. And I think a lot of the guys in the band had graduated that previous June, so this was sort of their sending off into the real world, and you know, we tagged along, and it was a lot of fun, you know. A lot of experience, got to meet a lot of musicians from around the country I never would have had a chance to do before, and also playing in venues around the country. It's very, you know, it's a different vibe than in New York, where, you know, I think New York, you play a show and everyone's kind of have this thing going, what do you got? Playing across the country was just more like, oh yeah, great, you know.
Go out to have a good time.
Yeah, well, and the musicians are allowed to have a good time together, and you know, we're all, you know, everyone's supportive of ourselves.
It's the circus instead of the show.
Yeah.
You know, I got you. The circus instead of the show.
So that was you know, it was a great experience, and you know, it definitely gave me some thoughts about, you know, playing out, you know, in the future, sort of how to conduct yourself, and also how venues should conduct themselves as well. When you get paid in beer, you gain a lot of weight.
way to the gazebo to prepare to perform, so I took the opportunity to learn about how he juggles life and music and all of his influences along the way.
Alright, so I wanted to ask you, since becoming a father, how's that changed you musically?
I think in many ways it's motivated me to do it more, and not so much that I don't want it to be a part of my life. I very much do, but I think it's, for me, it's always been my passion, my dream, and I want to in my life show that if you're passionate about something that is positive and good, you should pursue it. No matter what you do. It might not be your job or whatever, but being passionate about something is a very good thing, and seeing it through and acting on it is good too. You need that balance in your life. So I try to live that and show that to my kids on a daily basis. That for me, music is one of my passions, and I do follow it as far as I can, and still make time for life on the other end too. So balancing what you need to do in your life and what you want to do, and making sure there's ample time for all of it is a challenge, but it's what makes life worth living.
Okay, so would you say your wife is extremely supportive, marginally supportive? What's the relationship there with you and your music?
We'll say tolerable. We'll put it that way.
Yes, understood.
Yeah, it's
been there.
It's I think she was very supportive of it as we got to know each other and whatnot. But there's a lot to life, and we all have priorities and whatnot, and to me, I do my best to make sure that music has its own place that doesn't intrude upon other aspects of life that are important to me.
Yes. Okay. One other kind of personal question. It's not personal. Let's say whatever controls the universe, right? Whatever controls the universe comes down to you, comes into a form and speaks to you and says, I can make sure that your family never has to deal with unwarranted pain or suffering, ever. Unwarranted.
Yeah.
Now, but you can only play one more song, and you can only play that song for the rest of your life. That's what you have to do to make this happen. It could be your song, anybody else's song. What song would you play?
I don't know how much it might, cause pain upon people around me if I play the same song all the time. But that's a tough one, and to me, I kind of got to go back, to where my musical roots are, and that's a lot of early rock and roll, roots rock, and all that sort of stuff. So I'd probably say it'd be something early Beatles, Please Please Me, up there. Saw Her Standing There, one of those great little tunes. It's got little interesting hooks to it, and just a ton of fun to play, and you can do a ton of things with it, and I probably would get bored, but I think I could do a lot of different things with that, one of those songs. But again, I'll see how long everyone around me lets me live, but it'll probably be something around that era.
Diana's Bath was Hex's first real project that hatched in '93 with high school friends Tom Winter, Chris Smith, and Chris Carbone. They all went to a summer camp near Diana's Bath, New Hampshire, where Hex was first bitten by the bug that would find much of his person for years to come. This was a simple group of vocals and guitar that was realized with the 2 and then with the 4-track recorder. In conversations with Tom Winter, I have learned how enthusiastic Hex has always been in writing and collaborating, and how it's never faded over time. He even confronted Tom after Tom's long hiatus from music to tell him to start writing again, something that Tom thought he wasn't very good at and that he was quite simply getting wrong. Hex said, I write music in the now, you write music people will listen to 10 years from now. They created a unique, sometimes eerie sound on that 4-track recorder, Hex joked about the depth of some of the lyrics. We were young and needed the money. Well, regardless of depth of lyrics, this was a highly fruitful attempt that surely foreshadowed Hex's vision for years to come.
Would you say the Beatles are your major influence, is your biggest influence from that era? And let's say if you broke it down by like decades, from the 50s on, what would be your biggest draws as far as music?
You know, the 50s, I always go back to, you know, Sun Studios, Elvis, Johnny Cash, you know, Orbison had, you know, some touch in there too, Jerry Lee Lewis. So, you know, if you consider just the, you know, different genres and whatnot and things going on there, it was pretty wonderful. But, you know, if you pick one artist, I have to say Elvis, because, you know, he touched it all. You know, he was fantastic. Johnny Cash as well.
Kind of similar to what the Beatles did when they came over. They came in and they just touched everything.
Yep. And it's interesting when you look at the 60s in America. You know, I wasn't alive yet, but a lot of the artists that I am into, American artists, they're learning a lot of these, you know, blues R&B songs from American artists from the 50s through British artists coming out in the 60s. You know, so there's obviously, you know, a ton of influence there. And after the Beatles came over, they played a lot of, even stole a lot of these American kind of pop songs while developing their own craft of song. They you know, had some excellent stuff too early on. But, you know, it's just interesting how you talk about the Beatles, how they sort of took that, the Stones, took these songs and, you know, a lot of people say took the balls out of them, but really introduced those songs and those artists to you know, the next generation of musicians.
Very cool.
So, you know, 60s, I guess, I mean, early Beatles to me, up to Rubber Soul, hugely influential to me. The 70s, you know, like we talked about Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath. You know, that's a great band, Deep Purple. I guess the band is, you know, kind of late 60s to the 70s. Grateful Dead. Just a ton of, you know, think of kind of what I play. All those bands sort of mash up in here, and a lot of them are coexisting, playing the same bills in the 70s. You know, lots of great music there. You know, 80s. You know, gets a little muddier for me. It's a lot of artists I listen to, but I'm not sure how much influence I take a ton of it. You know, 90s. I'd say Soundgarden to me was one of the first bands I heard that, you know, put a lot of this stuff together to me and said to me, "Wow, anything is possible with music." And then, you know, from the 80s, you know, past the 80s, I went back to a lot of artists, Beethoven, Black Flag, you know, a lot of those sort of artists, Ramones in the 70s into the 80s. I kind of, you know, got more into that stuff later, partially from, you know, Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, a lot of these bands opening up those gates for me, much like the Beatles did to American artists, you know, in the 60s. So, yeah, you know, I in a lot of different projects I play a lot of different music, but because I'm into a lot of different music, to me it was never, this is heavy metal, this is hard rock, it was never that. It was always music to me. Everything is, you know, someone else can define it. To me it's music. If I'm into it, I'm into it. I don't need to put a label on it to make it special or fancy or to market it. Just, it is what it is. And I think that kind of comes out in my songs and my playing.
The Shipwrecks formed in 2000, a hardline New York punk sound. Hex reunited with Diana's Bath alum Chris Smith, along with Frank Morris and Ryan Sackreiner, while living in Brooklyn. They played the scene with moderate success over the next year and a half, being influenced by late 70s and 80s punk acts like the Dead Boys, the Sex Pistols, as well as the Rolling Stones. Most known tracks are Irish Mob and Civil War Lover, which evolved into Loco's 5 Minute for Fighting years later. They did have a one-off reunion in 2004, but with friction still inside the group, nothing more came of it.
We never submitted this, but this was one of my previous bands. We wrote a sync. They were soliciting for jingles for Snap, way back when they made soda, long time ago. So kind of went like this. I'm just a classic iced tea man, and I'm looking for a drink. No, it's as good as can be, man. Looking as fast as I can. Dying of heat, I reach for the drink that just cannot be beat. Grab Snap, oh yeah. Grab Snap, oh yeah. I had a whole bridge and stuff too. I'm not gonna torture you with that stuff.
Very nice. Very nice.
Loco is described accurately as Elvis meets Motorhead. Established in 2014, Hex brought together two talented musicians, Jim Krause on drums and Anthony Kapowski on bass. Began rehearsals at Jeff Phillips' legendary Dome Studios in California. The trio gelled immediately and formed a tight musical bond. No doubt aided by a few pints at the Michigan pub for their weekly post-rehearsal treatment. The band played its first gig at the Hook Down, a concert series recording touring musicians. In discussions with Jim Krause, I learned Hex as a bandmate hasn't changed much since Diana's Bath days. Jim, who had been out of bands for many years before answering Hex's Craigslist ad, was blown away by the amount of collaboration that was encouraged. This was Hex's project, but Fuego is all about the music, and his honest, artistic method, pooling talent, and letting those musicians express, boded well and added gems to the overall sound. After a couple of years, the group had to take a hiatus due to bassist Anthony Kapowski's health. Unfortunately, tensions between the rhythm sections may delay a reunion over time.
You talked about how music goes on in your head. It's similar for me too, and I understand that's how like the punk folk thing could come together, and you've done a very good job because both elements are in the music. But when a brainchild like that happens and you get a sound in your head and it starts mashing up, do you have to go right to playing it? Do you have to get it out, or do you kind of do like a thought experiment with it? How do you realize it?
If I say to myself, I'm going to remember this later, I'm not. So I'll think of something in the shower or anywhere. If I'm not near a guitar, I got my phone with me. I hum the riff, or if it's something lyrical, write down the lyrics, hum the melody. I got to get it down immediately because whatever struck with me at that moment, and, stayed with me to the next moment, it's worth exploring to me. And I have to remember it as it's in my head at that point. What I found is if I try to remember later, it never sounds right.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of times I'll come in and say, I want this to be sort of a, stacked soul kind of thing. And it comes out very different when I'm done with it. And that's through the exploration of working through it. What immediately might hit me as one thing might evolve into something else, or might actually be something else I just haven't got.
Boxcar Hex as a concept began near the end of the Shipwrecks run in 2001. Hex Fuego needed to branch out a bit. Having so many melodies in his head, the genres began to merge, and 12 years later morphed into what would be known as Boxcar Hex and the Broadway Riverbanks. He started to write exercising those chords and words, writing an astounding 20 songs in 2 weeks. And in 2005, the vision received a substantial boost as Hex and Tom Winter reconnected. Material went back and forth, collaboration and critique fueled the Life project. By 2013, the principal act of Boxcar Hex and the Rahway Riverbank started a new chapter of Hex's own folk-punk fusion. The band is a fluid march of musicians coming in and out to record and perform what essentially is Hex's solo project. You may see him out alone with his acoustic or playing fully backed, or should I say joined by a band of friends and collaborators. Unfortunately, the Rahway Riverbank's incarnation, including Winter, the Garfunkel to Hex's Simon, missed last year's Cranford Porch Fest. This was due to an injury to Hex's elbow. An infection swelled up and Hex was hospitalized 3 weeks before the event. With mobility in his hand at a nil, Boxcar Hex decided to opt out of the event rather than risk backing out right before the show. Hex has expressed a willingness to give the event a go later in 2018. All hopes are for Tom Winter's ability to appear as well. That would surely be a crescendo for the two men, rounding out full circle Hex's 25-year odyssey.
Well, I've got 5,000 heartaches weighing on this heart of mine. That's 5,000 reasons to think you'll be unkind. Well, don't mind me wondering when you're gonna screw my mind. That's 5,000 heartaches. Let's just take our time. Well, you look real good. The whiskey glass I've been sipping on all night. And you sound good, talking over that Hank song playing all night. But it looks to me like I felt this way before. That 5,000 heartaches, and I don't need any more. Well, I've got 5,000 heartaches weighing on this heart of mine. Think you'll be unkind. Don't mind me wondering when you're gonna screw my mind. 5,000 heartaches, 5,000 heartaches, 5,000 heartaches. So let's just take our time.
Hex Fuego Lobinger, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.